camera off, and if people can keep their microphones on mute unless they've got a question. That'll just make it a bit easier to us. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming along to the webinar today to find out more about Vattenfall's Unlock Our Future Fund. So my name is Susan Osbeck, and I'm the chair of the panel. And we've got the both enjoyable and difficult job of advising Foundation Scotland on which projects will receive grants. So also with me today is Morag McCorkindale, who also sits on the panel and will be helping facilitate the question session a bit later. B. Jefferson from Foundation Scotland, who many of you may have already spoken to, and she'll be telling you more about how to apply for to the fund. And we've also got Angie Fraser joining us, who's was in one of the groups that was the recipient of a previous grant. So the fund supports projects in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire that contribute towards a climate smart future. Every year Vattenfall contributes £150,000 to the fund, and that's going to be for the lifetime of the wind farm, which at the moment is 20 years. 10% of that money is ring fenced for activities that take place within Black Dog or that support Black Dog residents, because Black Dog is where the cables land and the power station and the substation is. So this is our third year of funding. Of the funding applications, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the new applications and hearing about the great projects that people are working on. The main aim of the fund is to support local charitable activities, and the idea is that they should meet at least 3 of the following criteria. So they should contribute to a climate smarter world with sustainability at its core, invest in community facilities and activities that are fit for the future and are environmentally sustainable, especially community spaces and transport. They should be creative solutions. If you've been involved before, you may have heard us use the word innovative, and Bee's going to talk more about that. But we're going for the term creative solutions now. We feel it's more approachable, that one. And the project should also ensure a legacy and a lasting impact, which clearly brings benefits to the local community. So the best way to give you some examples is obviously to talk about some of our previous recipients. So we funded a few different e-bicycles, such as the e-cargo bike for the Camp Hill school, which allows staff and students to do deliveries around their campus, providing supplies to residents, and it replaced the use of a car. So obviously it helped contribute to the climate, a better climate, a world with better climate control, and obviously as well it helped with community facilities. We helped fund solar and thermal battery storage for Afford and District Men's Shed, where they're helping improve the mental health of the community as a whole with classes and groups. We helped fund even carbon efficient theatre lighting in the barn at Bankery. And we've also contributed to the development and build of the prototype hydrogen car, which is a project that students are working on to produce a racing car for the Shell Eco Marathon. So we've helped with the travel costs of that. So that one obviously fitting the bill of that hydrogen is an alternative, climate-friendly fuel, and we're investing in future generations there. So a lasting legacy. So I think that just gives you a flavour of the kind of projects that we've been able to help support. And I think it's a case of a hand over to Bea now to tell you a bit about how to go about applying to the fund.
Okay, thank you for that, Susan. So, how to apply for the fund? So I'm sure that's what you're all most interested in at the current time. There are 2 different grants, a small grant available that's up to £2,000, and a larger grant that's up to £30,000, but 15,000 in any one year. And the processes are a little bit different for the small grants and large grants. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. Now, it is only open to voluntary sector groups that have to be constituted. And there are some standard eligibility criteria that relate to all Foundation Scotland's fund. So first, I'll just very briefly go through those, but I'll take you to where you can find out more about them on our website so that you'll be able to see for reference what they are. So on our website, I'm sure a lot of you would have already found the page for the Unlock Our Future Fund. And hopefully you can see that web page okay. Susan, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see it? Yep. So on the website, you'll see details about the fund, much of which I'm going through today, and you can come back to for reference. But towards the bottom of that page, you'll see a couple of links to the standard Foundation Scotland criteria. So particularly who can apply and if there's anything that can't be funded. Now, as I say, these are criteria that stretch across Foundation Scotland's projects. So if any of them are unclear, or you're wondering if actually do they really apply to this programme, please just get in touch and ask. So who can apply? It has to be a community group that has a constitution. It doesn't have to be a registered charity, but the organisation should have broadly charitable objectives. So we can't fund individuals and we can't fund private businesses that are in business to make a profit. It is open to community groups. And we do have criteria we expect as far as the management committee goes. So we expect at least three unrelated people on the management committee. And we always ask for a copy of the constitution with the application. So in the constitution, we'll check things such as if there's charitable purposes in the constitution and what it says about what's usually called an asset lock, and what happens if the organisation is dissolved. So what would happen to the assets in that case. We also ask for a copy of the accounts and have some questions on there about financial procedures as well. And we ask that the accounts are independently examined by somebody as well. When it comes to policies, the only policy that we insist on is if an organisation is working directly with children or vulnerable adults, we expect the organisation to have a safeguarding policy. Other than that, we don't insist on any policies in particular, but of course it's good practice for many organisations to have other sorts of policy in place. Now, there are some things we can't fund, and again, there's a link on the website that goes through all these. So we can't fund applications from individuals or non-constituted groups. We can't fund costs that have already been incurred before the funding decision was made. The two points on this list that tend to cause more of an issue than any of the others are the points about advancement of religion or politics and statutory organisations. We can't fund a project if primary purpose is advancement of religion or politics. And that can sometimes be an issue when we've got applications to this type of fund for something like improvements to a church building. If the church building is used predominantly for worship, then that would be excluded under this requirement. However, if a church owns a church hall that is used by the wider community and it's free for use by anybody of any religious or none, that's absolutely fine. So if a religious organisation applies, the building they're applying for, assuming it's a building, or the activity has to be open to the whole community. With statutory undertakings, that tends to be an issue in projects that are associated with schools. So a school can't apply for improvements to its building because that would be seen as statutory responsibility. It can't apply for activities that are taking place as part of the curriculum. However, activities that are outside the normal curriculum could be eligible. And we always suggest that it's actually the parent-teacher association or the parent council who applies, because that then makes it just slightly separate to the school. So if your project is something that's related to a school or a religious group, please get in touch and we can talk about it just to make sure you are eligible. So those are the main standard eligibility criteria. And if you have questions on any of these, please just type something into the chat box. We've got a Q&A session at the end. So if anything's not at all clear, just jot it down and we can come back to it. So let me just go back to the presentation. One question I've been asked a few times is, are repeat applications permitted? And yes, that's not a problem. We have given the feedback to groups in the past when a project hasn't been particularly well developed, come back to us at another stage. And projects often have several phases, so there's no problem about a repeat application. If you have applied in the past and been rejected, please get in touch and we can discuss the reasons why you were rejected and whether a repeat application what they should need to address for the panel. So it's now open, closes the 12th of April, so got a fair amount of time to put in an application form. So before you apply, firstly, please just check through the guidance. On the web page, there is a summary of the guidance, and there's also a link to a longer strategy document. So that goes through quite a lot of detail about things such as eligibility. Also, please get help. I'm very, very happy to talk to anybody who's thinking of putting in an application, at whatever stage you are in your thinking, whether it's just an initial outline or whether you want me to have a quick read through the application that's ready to be submitted. Please get in touch. I'll do one-to-one sessions with you by phone, by Teams, by Zoom, whatever is convenient for you. There are also other organisations that can potentially help with the sorts of projects that are coming forward for this fund. Local Energy Scotland, they deal particularly with projects relating to renewables. And Stephen Young, their local development officer, wave your hand, Stephen, if anybody can see on this particular page. When we come to the Q&A session, if you do have any particular queries about Local Energy Scotland and what they do, I'm sure Stephen will be more than happy to take those. So Local Energy Scotland, particularly looking at things such as renewables. There's another organisation, Zero Waste Scotland, that have a programme that's particularly useful as far as assessing energy efficiency of activities, including buildings. And despite the current lockdown, Zero Waste Scotland is still doing their assessments of buildings. So if you are putting together an application that involves improvements to a building and improving their energy efficiency, please get in contact with Zero Waste Scotland, and I'll be providing some of the contact details at the end for these organisations. It does make a really big difference when you're putting together a funding application if you've got the information from an independent party that's going through things such as what sort of efficiency improvements you could get on a building, what the best options are. Makes writing an application so much easier. There's also your third sector interface organisations, so Aberdeenshire Voluntary Action, ACVO. They are particularly useful for issues around organisational development. So perhaps if you've got issues around your constitution, you need somebody to talk to on that. They're also very good at advising on other sources of funding as well. So if you've got a larger project where you need to bring in other funding to combine with the Vattenfall funding to make up the project, it's worth talking to them. There's also the Aberdeenshire Rural Partnerships, who are often very good at getting local links and partnerships together. So once you've done your preparatory work, you'll need to register online to put in an application. Let me show you the website. So at the bottom of the page, there's a how to apply box, and click here to apply. This year, for the first time, on the website, the only option given there is to apply online. In the past 2 years, we've had options of an online application or a downloadable Word document. This year, we just revamped the website and we've just got the option for the online application. There's a number of reasons for that. One of them is that more and more people were going for the online application anyway, so it doesn't seem that effective use of our time to put several versions of applications there. But also, it is a lot better for us because if we have Word versions as well, we have to transpose the information from the Word version onto our grant management system. Whereas the online applications, the information goes straight into our grant management system. And that then reduces the risk of things like emails going astray, information ending up wrongly transcribed, the like. So it's a lot safer to actually have the online application. We used to always offer the opportunity of having paper copies and posted out and filled in by hand as well. We can't do that anymore because our office is temporarily closed. So it has to really be either a Word version or an online version. If you really don't feel comfortable with an online version, please just phone or email and I can send you out a Word version. But please have a go at the online version. Another advantage of it is that if you get stuck and you want to call me about it, I can actually get into the draft version and see where you've got to. So it does actually make it quite a lot easier for seeing how far you've got in the application, what you've put in there already, just getting advice on applications. So I know that sometimes people are a bit wary about online applications, but it's fairly user-friendly. It saves as you go along, so you don't suddenly lose it if something goes wrong with the IT. So please use it if you can, but if you don't want to, it's absolutely fine to fill in a Word version instead. So you apply online. Let me just go back. As I said, there's a slightly different process between the small grants and the larger grants. So if your application is under £2,000, we rely very much on the information you've given us. I might phone you if there's anything that particularly needs clarifying, but I don't do anything as close to an in-depth assessment as I do on the larger grants because it's about proportionality really. And the decisions get made quicker. The panel will make the decision in mid-May on those smaller grants. The larger grants, we actually have a two-stage process. So what happens is that the projects get shortlisted at that panel meeting in May. Now, the shortlisting really does focus on the program priorities and whether the projects fit in with the program priorities. For the first 2 years, we have been very, very much oversubscribed. So we want to really focus down on those applications that are the absolute best fit with the program priorities. So when you're filling in the application, please really focus on the question about how you meet the program priorities, because that is key to getting you through to the second stage. Once we've shortlisted projects, we do a full assessment of the project. That's done by Foundation Scotland. It takes the form of a phone call. So we'll go through the information you've supplied to us, and I'll just go through briefly some of the things we'll look at in that assessment. And it's really so that we can get clarification and make sure we can explain what the project's doing as well as we possibly can to the panel when they meet to make the decision. So Foundation Scotland don't make the decisions on the grant funding, but we carry out an assessment in order for it to go to the panel. And the decisions are going to be taken late June by the panel on which the project's to fund. So when we're doing an assessment, the first thing we'll always look at is, well, the fit with fund priorities. As I say, that is really key in this project. So as Susan has already mentioned, our fund priorities, there are 4 of them. Any of you who applied in previous years will notice a couple of small changes in these. In previous years, we've said that all projects need to meet all 4 priorities. Having had feedback from applicants and having discussed it with the panel, we decided to give ourselves a little more flexibility and say at least 3 of these objectives need to be met. But the strongest projects will meet all 4. There's also, as Susan mentioned, a change in the wording on the 3rd bullet point. That used to talk about innovation. Now it talks about creative solutions. The reason we changed that is that the feedback we got from applicants and potential applicants was that the word innovation was quite off-putting, and also people frequently interpreted it as meaning technology, high-tech innovation, when in fact that wasn't really what was wanted. If you remember, the whole purpose of this program is about moving towards a low-carbon future. Technology can play a part in that, but so can many, many other things. Low-tech solutions can actually be very effective. Behavioral change, education, those are all things that can help us move towards a climate-smart future. So it doesn't have to be high-tech solutions. However, the panel do want to see things that are creative, new, different, because our fund can only fund a very small part of taking us towards a low carbon future. If we can find different ways of doing things that can then be rolled out to other individuals, other organizations, that can really multiply the impact of this fund. So yes, we've done away with the word innovative, but being creative is still very much to be encouraged. Even if your project on the surface of it looks to be something that actually is not that creative, please just tell us how you can find out whether it works, and if it works, roll it out to other organizations. Because again, it's about making a bigger impact, about telling other people what works well, because that really multiplies the benefit the fund can have. And that's really all about the lasting legacy of this program, about doing things better, doing things differently. There are a few other things that the panel is looking for that are not eligibility criteria that will strengthen applications. Now, one thing the panel has had a certain amount of discussion about has been what we've termed here the energy hierarchy. And what we mean by that is balancing reduction in energy demand with things like generating renewables. So if a cold, drafty village hall is being refurbished, it might actually be more sensible to put a little bit of money into draft proofing and installation before you put a lot of money into a air source heat pump or PV on the roof. So it's recognizing the importance of different approaches to carbon reduction. It's not just about renewables. It can also be about very simple aspects of energy efficiency. So it's taking a balance there. We've also got in there local procurement. So if you can source supplies locally, please do. If there are local suppliers of whatever your project is buying. Strengthening community partnerships. So projects are always stronger if communities work together, organizations work in partnership to deliver. Capacity building locally. So that's about improving knowledge locally. So that could be about sharing what's worked. It could be about sharing good project management skills. Match funding, leverage, that's always a slightly controversial one as well. There's no absolute requirement for match funding in this funding source. However, if we can see that putting in the Vattenfall money will result in you then being able to bring in considerably extra sources of money in order to build a project with more impact, that always is a plus point. The final one is a bit of sort of catch-all, enhancing quality of life for all. So what's being got at there is that, say you're refurbishing a village hall, it isn't really just the village hall that is what matters. It's what goes on in the village hall. It's all the added benefits. It's how the community really benefits from what you're doing, how individuals benefit from what you're doing. So making sure you tell us about the impacts that your organization has, as well as even if you're only actually applying for some part of what the organization does in terms of energy efficiency. So make sure we understand the wider benefits of what you do. The other things we look on as when we're doing assessment are organizational capacity. So you will have submitted your constitution, your accounts, and we'll just check that those all meet our standard criteria. We might ask you about things such as the skills you have if it's a particularly large, complicated project. We might ask you a bit about your funding as an organization as a whole. We also look at evidence of need. Now, what that means is going to vary quite a lot with different projects. So for an activity in a community, evidence of need might be about asking that community about what's wanted. For a building project, evidence of need might be more sort of technical assessments. Very much varies with the project. We also look at the project planning. So that will partly be things such as costs. So have you presented a clear budget? Have the figures you've got in there got a reasonable rationale behind them? So have you got quotes? We normally ask for 3 quotes for expenditure over £3,000 for an item. Now, I absolutely appreciate it. At the moment, getting quotes from people is not easy at all. So if you can't get quotes, don't worry. Don't let that stop you putting in an application. We can always, if we award the money, have a conditional award that says subject to quotes. Or else you can carry on trying to get quotes while we're doing the assessment process. We can always change things while we're doing the assessment if you've got quotes in between submitting and when we do the assessment. So don't let it hold you back if you haven't been able to get quotes. Please just put it in anyway. Timescales is often an issue. We have the great advantage in that this fund is going to be around for several years in the future. It's not like one of those government funds that has to be spent by the end of March, otherwise it's lost. Now, one of the implications of that is that if we get an application in from a project, which is a good project, but actually it's probably not going to get off the ground for another 2 years, actually would prefer it came back next year rather than allocating money to it this year. And we have had a few applications that has potentially good projects, but it's just really too early. So we want to know that something will be able to get off the ground in the next 12 months. Now, obviously, a lot of projects have got delayed because of the current situation, and we can be flexible. But when we're doing the assessment, we want a reasonable level of reassurance that the project will be able to get underway in the next year. We also check if there are any basic permissions, planning permissions, building warrants and the like, insurance cover, things like that. And finally, we always look at what the impact will be. So is there any sort of clear statement as to what impacts are expected, both in terms of the environmental impacts, particularly carbon savings and the like, but the wider social impacts as well. So what difference will it make to our communities? Now, assuming we award the money, we then send you terms and conditions of the grants, which is a pretty standard set of terms and conditions, but we do have in them this term about normally 12 months allowed for expenditure for single year awards. Like I say, we can be flexible if current circumstances get in the way of things. We have some requirements on publicity. So, for example, if you're buying a vehicle, we like to see an accreditation actually on the vehicle. We also do a certain amount of press work and would like you to do things like provide pictures and quotes for that. Sometimes we have specific conditions about a particular grant. That's very often things such as where a project hasn't been able to get a quote and on the costs, and we've asked for more quotes to be provided. Once you have returned your terms and conditions, the payment, it depends slightly on the type of project. Capital projects, we usually pay on evidence of invoices being provided. Revenue projects will usually pay up front as soon as there is a reasonable reassurance that your project is able to go ahead. So for a number of our projects at the moment, they've been delayed, so we'll release the money when they start. But capital projects are usually, we wait until the invoices are in. But it's a pretty quick turnaround process on payments, so you won't be waiting around for months while the builder needs paying. We can get them turned around fast. Once the project's finished, we have a fairly standard completion report needs putting in. If a project lasts over several years, we'll ask for an interim report on it after each year. However, because this program is slightly different to a lot of our other programs in that we are particularly looking at long-term impacts here, we'll probably follow up with you at a later date as well, just to check how things are going and the long-term impacts. Now, that won't be asking for masses of paperwork each year. It'll probably be a quick phone call or email just to see how things are going with you. Right, that's quite enough of me talking. I would actually like to bring in now one of our previous applicants to perhaps give a little bit of an outline from a applicant's point of view about how all this is done. So could I hand over to Angie Fraser, please?
Yes, hello. Thanks for inviting me to have this opportunity to chat to everyone. So the first year the fund opened, I helped Aberdeenshire Sailing Trust apply for funding towards an electric vehicle that could tow our boats. How did we come up with this? Well, our starting point was really looking at our carbon footprint and thinking, what could we do to reduce our carbon footprint? Working out what it was for the bits that we could measure and what we could do. And transport was a big part of what we were doing. We have 3 venues across Aberdeenshire. So we have to move stuff between our venues, and some of that is moving boats, towing boats. So back when we were applying, there weren't very many vehicles on the market, electric vehicles, I should say, that could tow. There are more now, but back then there weren't many, or many that would be within any kind of a budget we could get to. But we thought this is something we should really be trying to do. And we want to be doing this at the start, not waiting and doing this like lots of people wait and say, oh, it's not time yet, we'll wait. And we thought, well, we're burning carbon right now, we need to act now. So that's where we started. So then we started with the application process. And because we had figures on what our carbon footprint had been, we'd been recording mileage, it was easy to work out we had a good idea of how much carbon we would reduce, so we could put that into the application. So we knew exactly what the difference was it would make. There's lots of space in the application to talk about innovation, or now creativity. So there's lots of opportunities for that. And when you're thinking about that, then you have to start thinking about what is the good news story? What is the story that you can tell everyone about why this is important and why you want other people to follow with what you're doing, and to think that, could I do this too? Could we as a family change, or could we as an organization make changes? So I guess the good news story, or the innovation in that, was us thinking that our boats, when they were on land moving between venues, would be powered by wind as well. So it felt like quite a good story, that thinking, well, this is worth doing. And it took a while to get the funding, because obviously we were successful with this fund, but the fund only funded, let's see, a bit of the vehicle. We had to find the top up funding for the rest. So we had to get some reserves and some Home Energy Scotland a loan to make up the last bit of funding. And since then, I guess we've done lots of sharing this story further and wider, sharing it through the sailing community, sharing it with our governing body, trying to shout about it wherever we can, so that people realise electric vehicles can tow. We've also been putting pressure on Charge Place Scotland for bigger spaces, so that we can fit trailers on the back, just because this is the beginning of a change, and this fund is all about change, and thinking how you can tell the story of the change. Last year, I also helped, as a volunteer, help Peterhead Sailing Club, where I'm a member, and it's one of the venues we sail from. I helped them apply for funding to make changes to their building, and the changes they wanted to make was solar panels and battery storage, a Tesla wall, and electric car charging. And the thinking behind that, again, we had to think of what's the innovation, what's the story, why is this so important? And you're thinking people can come and go for the day sailing, and they can plug their car in and they get some free sunshine miles to get them back home. And then they go out for a play and a sail, and they do something great for their mental health, great for everything, how they're feeling. But at the same time, when they go back in and they make a cup of tea, this was us imagining it before COVID, because we can't go in and make cups of tea or have showers. But when you go back into the clubhouse for your shower or for your cup of tea, you've got solar heated water and solar heated cup of tea because of the battery storage. And thinking about it with the building as well, of course, we had a good idea from all of our electricity bills, how much electricity we had been using, and how much the grid, the carbon, if you like, the grid would be on average for a year from our connection. That's easy to find on the internet. So again, how much this would reduce, and how what a difference it would make. So we could quantify that by putting that in the application. So again, I think from our point of view, looking at a change that you can make that has a story that is a really positive story, that other people will then think, oh gosh, could I really do that? Could we do that? So we're hoping that when we have all the changes in place at Peterhead, members will think, gosh, an electric car is not so difficult. Or visitors will think, oh great, look, when I go there, I can plug in my car. Fantastic. Or people will think again, oh, this is fantastic. We've got hot water straight from the sun, battery storage for the heating, so that people will think this is not so difficult. There's lots of ways people can make these changes at home, and there's lots and lots of funding and ways that people can do it. So sometimes just seeing the technology, understanding it, or seeing the change that you've made to make it possible means more people will follow. So since these applications, I've been trying to push more and more, as I said, with our governing body. And I think, was it last week, I had to make a podcast with Our Way Scotland all about the things that we've been doing, because I believe we're probably leading the way in Scotland and the sailing community with our changes to try and get ready for the new normal, if you like. So I would say it's definitely worth speaking to everyone at Foundation Scotland, speaking to your committees, trying to pull your ideas together and think about what you want to do and how it's going to make a difference, how it's going to make a positive story that will really make a change, how it would reduce your carbon footprint, or how it would just provide something for a climate smarter world. As they say, it might be exciting cargo bikes. It doesn't have, like Bea was saying, it doesn't have to be all technology. It might be a cozy insulation around your village hall. It could be all sorts of things, but thinking about how it would be an exciting story for people. I think that's probably all I've got to say. Is that okay?
Thank you, Angie. I thought that was an excellent example of the difference the fund makes. And it's really good to hear how you're telling other people about it, because that's really what provides the impact of this fund. Right, we'll be going on to a Q&A session, but I've actually lined up a couple of polls as well to try to give us a little more idea about how many of you are actually likely to apply and what sort of support you need. So just before we go over to Morag, who will be chairing the Q&A session, and please, if you have questions, just type them into the chat box. I'm just going to launch a poll first. Hang on. So the first poll is actually, are you going to apply? Oh, good. Glad to see so many applications are likely to be coming in. That's, so 20 out of 29 have voted on that one. I shall launch. I don't think I can launch 2 polls at the same time. So any further ones wish to apply on that one? Well, it's interesting that we've got more small applications possibly coming in as well. Right, any final on that? We're about to end polling. And I'll just give you the other. So I'll share the results of that so you can see them. And now I'd like to know how many of you would like to book a support session in? Excellent, that's good. Now I will hopefully be able to get the details of who wants one from this, but I've not tried that before. So also, please just feel free to contact me with some times that you'd be free for a one-to-one session. I normally work Wednesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, but can be flexible to fit in with your requirements. Happy to do sessions in the evening as well. So good, 15 wanting a session. Right. So that's the results of that. I'm going to stop sharing that screen now and go over to Morag, who is, I hope, going to start on the Q&As.
Just checking I'm not on mute. The most commonly used phrase in English these days, you're on mute. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today. We've got some questions coming in, which we'll try and help with. It's not necessarily going to be me that's answering all of them. I have colleagues here to support in that. So we'll do the question and answer, and we'll be playing a short video at the end, very short video, about some previous applicants. So the first question is from James. I think it's very pertinent. Probably one for B. But Susan, you might have a comment. How does a project evaluate its environmental impact, such as reducing the carbon footprint of a project? And he points out that if you're not done this before, it's hard to know what to measure. Are there specific guidelines or tools that would calculate these aspects?
I can have a go at that, and then perhaps Susan, and I don't know whether Stephen Young will want to come in at all on this one as somebody from that background. Foundation Scotland are not at all prescriptive in this. I'm aware that a number of organisations who support carbon reduction have some extremely complex spreadsheets and the like that are available. We take the approach of look at what you can do reasonably easily. And that's going to be very specific to your individual circumstances. So if it's a building, you will have electric bills, and there are calculators out there that can give you the carbon emissions on electric bills. If it's a vehicle, you know how many mileage, how many miles you're doing each year. So think about the activity you're actually doing and where it's straightforward to find information from, but don't overdo it, because you don't want to be having to do incredibly complex calculations to come up with those figures. Susan, do you want to chip in?
Yeah, I think, I mean, especially for obviously the smaller projects, it may just be a case of providing just a high level overview of what you expect. You simply saying, you know, we're replacing a carbon intense fuel with something that is you know, more environmentally friendly. Obviously, if you have got a bigger project, it certainly would support it more if you can provide some sort of numbers. But yeah, I don't think we need to have an actual like spreadsheet of where you're going to, how you're going to reduce it and to the nth degree.
Stephen, I don't know whether you want to say anything from a Local Energy Scotland point of view.
Hi there. Yeah, it's difficult to answer in terms of without understanding what your project is. But specifically, if you're talking about a community building project, there's a few routes you can go down. One is talking to Zero Waste Scotland, who will give you a free energy assessment, which will include like financial calculations and carbon savings. It's also possible, you know, for certain types of projects, just to like speak to installers and contractor suppliers who will quite often include carbon saving calculations in their quotation. If it's a renewable energy project, there's a possibility that CARES or Local Energy Scotland could give some support there as well in terms of getting consultants on board to do some work. And I think I seen a note coming up there as well about talking to Home Energy Scotland, depending on this, again, depending on the applicant and what the end project is envisaged to be as well. And there's lots of useful stuff online. Yeah, if you just want to do quick and easy calculations. That's me.
Thank you for that.
And I think we've got a second question by James. I'm assuming it's the same James, but we've got quite a few questions, James, so it's all right with you. We'll work through the others and then come back to your second question. So this one's very pertinent, one for B perhaps. Can you apply for both a large grant and a small grant?
Potentially, yes. There's nothing to prevent you in doing that. The panel, well, I can't reply on behalf of the panel, but the fund is oversubscribed. So the panel might not wish to fund 2 projects from the same applicant, but perhaps I could ask Susan for a view on that. So I'm not saying no, but
Yeah, I mean, I can understand that you may want to put in an application if it's 2 separate parts of the project as a whole or something, or 2 completely different things. You might say, "Oh, this is a small thing that we want funded. This is a big thing." I mean, certainly we would have to evaluate each project on its own merits. But as B was saying, it is oversubscribed, and we do try and share it as best as we can. So it may be the case that you will only get one of those funded, but I can see why you might want to then hedge your bets, if rather than just focusing on one part of the project, trying to get 2 parts of the project funded in different ways. But yeah, we would just look at it on a case-by-case basis.
So Susan, would there be a phasing component here? So you might apply for one of the smaller grants in the first year in order to do some feasibility or viability or analysis work, and then apply for a bigger application in the second or future years for the project itself.
Yeah, that's one way of doing it, is if you just need a small amount to start with. And there is the multi-fund award that if it goes over 3 years, you can apply for a big amount, and with reducing amounts in the following 2 years. So if there is something that you know that's going to cost over several years, that is another option. So and like we said earlier, we're happy to have repeat applications, even if you have been funded. Again, we're trying to fairly share it around, but we will obviously still consider people who have been funded before.
Okay, thank you. I learned something every day. So there's one from Kate Redpath saying, can you fund staff costs? Now I know this is a frequently asked question. B, would you like to tackle that one?
potentially yes. There's nothing to stop the funding of staff costs. However, if it was an existing member of staff where funding had been lost from elsewhere, that is unlikely to be something that the panel would wish to support. If it was a new member of staff doing something specific to the fund's objective, that would be far more supportable. But yes, there's absolutely nothing to prevent funding staff costs in this. But if it was long-term core costs that weren't particularly related to what the fund objectives were, that is unlikely to get funded. It has to be very specific to the fund objectives.
So I've got a supplementary, not wishing to put you on the spot, but
Go
so
on.
new personnel costs for the delivery of the project or the initiative are fine. And obviously if it's a full-time person, then, you might be looking at that. But what about proportionate time for existing staff people working on the project?
Potentially.
Sorry.
Again, if there is a clear justification that it's delivering the project objectives that are in line with the fund objectives, yes. Across Foundation Scotland's funds, the thing we're slightly nervous about is picking up funding from projects that where the funding has ceased, and then we're now being asked to fund the staff costs of them. That's the area we tend to have issues with funding staff costs. That I know from a voluntary perspective is always not necessarily seen as being totally fair, but that's the response we tend to give on staff costs.
Okay, well, I hope everyone found that helpful. So James's second question was, they're looking at a multi-use games area for their community. Does anyone have any examples of how a multi-use games area project can creatively reduce its environmental impact so they can steer the project? Don't know if Susan would like to have a pop at that one first.
Yeah, it is quite a tricky one, because not knowing what all the games area would be. I mean, I suppose the thing would be to think, presumably this will be something that would be lit, so that it could be used at night. So you'd have to look at what kind of lighting. Obviously, these days it's becoming almost the case that you can't get anything other than LEDs. So, but I would also think about, I think we have previously had a request in for artificial grass, which we felt was quite difficult to justify, just because it is just plastic and very difficult to recycle. So I would be very careful about what kind of materials that you're looking to use in the games area.
Yeah, I think the materials point is well made, because there's the energy that goes into producing the materials as well, and whether or not they're recycled, and whether or not they can be recycled when they need to be replaced or disposed of. So I hope James finds that helpful. And
just one further thing I was thinking of adding on there is that there could be opportunities for engagement with the users in some way that links into education and understanding of environmental impacts. As Angie was saying with the Sailing Club project, an awful lot of the benefits of that has come through engagement with the people who use it, with the committee, with other Sailing Club members. So there could be lessons from that one to take forward as well.
yes, so the last one I've got here is really some helpful information from Angie. Thank you, Angie. I should probably have asked you directly. So just to let people know, this is the last one I've got. If you get any questions you're burning to ask, please just pop them in the chat. We've got a few minutes left. So Angie is saying Home Energy Scotland can also be helpful. And sorry, it was very useful for a house, but the electricity bills give a good starting point, and the carbon intensity of the grid is available online. And search on Google for your location or supplier. And I know you have to have the kind of mind that likes doing this kind of thing, but there are quite a lot of carbon calculation formulae and so on that are available. And some of the society websites are quite good about that. So that's the last question. Has anyone got anything else they would like to ask?
So I just see one from Petra where she's asking about funding for resurfacing of tennis courts.
So
and would it be something we fund? Sorry?
I'm so sorry, Petra. I must have conflated that one with a multi-use games area.
I mean, it would be similar sorts of advice anyway, is that we would be saying, well, if you're just, what are you resurfacing it with? Is it just going to be, is it a concrete tennis court? What is the environmental sort of impact of it? I think this is the thing, I don't want to ever say that, no, we definitely wouldn't fund something, but you do have to look at how it fits in with fund priorities.
And I think also B's points about community use, you know, the actual use of the facility, the involvement of people and so on. So I haven't got another question. Just thinking, would either Stephen or Angie like to have a comment they'd like to make before we wind up, or shall we just go to the video? Looks like that's a no. They're resolutely staying on mute. So thank you very much, and everyone, for joining us today. And B has already said that she's very happy to take questions. Oh, one last one just came in, I think. Is it possible to calculate the benefits of bringing a new facility to a village area, which means people no longer have to travel far for the same facilities? I think it goes back again to the carbon emission reduction kind of calculation on miles saved. be able to find a formula for that. And the other thing, of course, is there are lifestyle and community benefits as well.
Yeah, I mean, with that one with the carbon impact, you could even just say, oh, we know that, you know, there's at least 50 journeys every week to people. You know, if this is a number of people that use facilities out with the community. We would hope to bring them all in. That gives us an idea as to how much of a benefit it's likely to give without having to go into the actual carbon numbers, you know.
Yeah, and there's time saved, and there's quality of life benefits, and there's also building up a resource for the community. Okay, well, thank you, James, frequent correspondent. I'm going to close the Q&A now and let Bea do her thing with the video. So be safe, everyone, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future.
So
thank you very
all.
much, team. Most enjoyable. Very refreshing. Thank you.
Thank you, and hope to be in touch with many of you soon. But I'll just play out on a few little clips of the projects we funded last year.
From all the students, staff and volunteers here at Camphill School, Aberdeen, we would like to say a huge thank you to the Vattenfall Unlock Our Future Fund.
Aberdeen District Men's Shed are absolutely delighted to get £15,000 from the Vattenfall Support Our Communities Fund.
Peterhead Sailing Club would like to thank the Vattenfall Unlock Our Future Fund for the generous grant that we received.
We are delighted to be the recipients of £15,000 from the Vattenfall Unlock Our Future Fund.
Thanks to Vattenfall Unlock Our Future Fund, Tarlin Development Group can install a living roof on their new community education facility.
Right.
Thanks to Vattenfall Unlock Our Future